The sovereign citizen movement begins with a simple, powerful belief that rules exist for everybody, except for sovereign citizens. It's not that they deny the existence of rules, it's that they think they've found the exception, and it's them. So the rules of the road, the laws of the land, the regulations of finance and commerce, and for sovcits who are also flat earthers, even the laws of physics, those are rules for peasants, NPCs, and the unenlightened masses. The true sovereign knows that no rule applies to him because he's already left the matrix. So it's natural to wonder, how is it that sovcits think that they can defy the rules that bind everybody else? Are they just selfish idiots, or are they something else entirely? Could they be wizards? Because if they are, and hear me out, that would explain one of the most powerful forms of magical thinking that ever came out of a sovcit's pulsating cranium. This is a form of financial alchemy so implausible as to leave the rest of us entirely baffled and confounded. It's the something-for-nothing infinite money glitch, the rags to riches enchantment that allows any pauper to access the wealth of royalty. And I'm told that once you learn this magic, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a builder or a farmer or a rat catcher, no matter how meager your income is, you can live like royalty. I know this sounds like a really odd idea, but just watch this montage of some of the most advanced practitioners that YouTube has to offer, and tell me this isn't some kind of magic.
And today, I am going to teach you how to have infinite money in less than 10 minutes.
By signing this document, okay, I have turned this document into a commercial instrument.
Your signature is quite literally worth money.
And the money that we're using nowadays is not real.
Bill means bill of exchange.
And cash is promissory note.
And note means promissory note, right?
In fact, money is created on the back of your signature.
The banks create the money.
Because by applying my signature to the document,
you have issued a security, namely a promissory note.
I turned it into a commercial instrument, negotiable instrument, a security.
And the bank is going to purchase that.
What is a bill of exchange? It's a negotiable instrument.
Let's imagine that you were going to go and discharge a mortgage debt. Let's say you win the lottery, you go in and pay off the debt.
Debt is an illusion.
What is a Federal Reserve note? It's also a negotiable instrument.
You never get the mortgage security discharged back into your possession.
So I've already shown you what a bill of exchange or bill looks like, but you get them in the mail and you hate them. So you know what those look like, your utility bills.
The credit agreement, which is a note, which is a security, which is a promissory note, which is a negotiable instrument.
Those are all bills of exchange. They're all negotiable instruments, just like these bad boys. And
This is cash. So when I hand it to the banker, I'm making a deposit.
Banks don't take deposits.
Debt, it's an illusion. It's just a word.
Starting to see where we're going with this?
And your debt is now discharged.
Yes, these are confidence-inspiring individuals, the kinds of people that I am certain you'd want to entrust your life savings to. You've just heard people like Brandon Joe Williams and Simon Goldberg reveal that debt doesn't exist and money isn't real, and that they can create money with the power of their minds. And, of course, signing a piece of paper can turn it into literal money. That's magic, right? It's like pulling a rabbit from the hat, only better. Like pulling money from a hat, but the hat is also made of money, and then you can use that money to buy a golden rabbit, but it turns out that the rabbit is a leprechaun in disguise. So he leads you to his pot of gold, but it turns out that the gold coins are actually made of diamonds. And all of this happened on your Mars colony, which you self-funded because you're already a trillionaire. Now, I expect once you've seen that the quality of their thinking, the clear-cut financial insights that I've just revealed, you want in. You want a piece of this action. Well, you know what? You are in luck, because today I'm going to reveal all of the mysteries. So Welcome to my magic school, Reynard's School of Wizarding and Witchcraft, which, unlike Hogwarts, is entirely unencumbered by copyright and also trans-inclusive. But hurry kids, your first class is about to start. It's Financial Herbology with Professor Dave Silver. And I wonder what he's been smoking today.
So you're saying a promissory note is not cash? Are you saying that? Are you challenging the Bills of Exchange Act? You know, the question is, what is cash? Is this cash? Does it meet the requirements of cash in the Bills of Exchange Act?
It helps to have a framework for understanding how Dave's magic works. Fortunately, the great sage and teacher Gary Gygax left us a taxonomy of spellcraft in the form of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, 2nd edition, first published in 1989. Spells, he tells us, come in 3 components: verbal, somatic, and material. Take a simple cantrip like Magic Stone. You begin with something ordinary, like a handful of pebbles. You speak the incantation, and that would be the verbal component. You perform the gestures, that's the somatic component. And through the ritual, the pebbles themselves in our grubby hands, well, they are the material component. And once it's all complete, the stones are transformed. They are now magical ammunition, fit for all kinds of wizarding mischief. But kids, don't get any ideas, my young apprentices. This is a very serious magic school, and Professor Dave Silver won't tolerate any tomfoolery whilst he's trying to teach financial alchemy. Dave begins with a mundane object. In this case, it will be a £5 note. And then he wraps it in the verbal component. That's his promise to pay, the signature and his thumbprint. And then he adds his own magical hand-waving. And after that, the spell resolves. The £5 note's vibrational energies have been elevated. It's been made 2,000 times more valuable.
What I keep saying is promissory notes are cash and cash are promissory notes. And I really want people to always remember that. Are cash. So you can use promissory notes. I mean, we're in the part of the cycle now where you can write your own promissory notes, and that is cash. You would write in words £9,995. And it's very important to have the £5 note laminated. Can't accept one promissory note without the other promissory note.
And the guy goes, I can't accept this, and returns it. And in legal terms, because he has he's refused the money, it actually gets rid of the debt.
There's rather a lot to unpack here, so let's do what any responsible apprentice of the arcane arts would do. And first we must identify which school of magic David and Richard are spellbinding today. The Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Guide 2nd edition identifies 8 schools of magic. They're things like abjuration, which provides protection; divination, which allows the scryer to know things without seeing them; and invocation, which allows magicians to harness magical energies, like casting fireballs. Dave's magic seems to be a lot more subtle, though. Judging by the way his spell works, it's probably not enchantment, because enchantment changes behaviour, bends minds, and overrides people's will. Now, I don't think that's what's happening here either. My guess is that this is probably some kind of illusion magic, because the money, the contracts and the obligations, they remain unmodified. But this wizard is altering the way that we see things, because invoices are made to look like payments, refusal is made to look like success, and Dave's powerful glamour is literally warping our perception. Aren't you curious how he does it? Well, Dave's magic is based on the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882. In his magic system, it's the one ring to rule them all. According to Dave, it's the final authoritative power that defines cash, currency, value, and possibly the underlying fabric of our entire cosmos. The Bills of Exchange Act is the English law that governs negotiable instruments. That's things like promissory notes, cheques, bills of exchange, and various kinds of commercial paperwork. A negotiable instrument is basically a financial obligation, typically a signed promise to pay something in the future. Now, given that Dave's magic is all about money, you might be wondering, why isn't he talking about more recent legislation like the Currency and Banknotes Act of 1954 or the Coinage Act of 1971? Why isn't he talking about all that modern monetary law, such as the regulations that govern bank transfers, credit cards, Bitcoin, and even fintech? Well, it's because, unlike you, with your barely formed magical mind, Dave is thinking like a true wizard. And he knows that old rules are more powerful than new. And that's why he is completely ignoring every applicable regulation enacted since the late 19th century. And I've heard it said that the best way to win legal cases is total ignorance of the law.
If it goes to court, if it does, this is the question: are promissory notes cash? And the answer is yes. Absolutely. Under UK legislation, promissory notes are cash.
Unfortunately, mundane courts have not always been kind to the wizarding class. It's almost as if they don't see things with the same enchanted eyes as us wizards. You might, for example, apparate into the High Court with a freshly inked scroll. You announce that the debt has been transmuted, and the judge may respond with that bleak anti-magic litany, calling our freeman of the land spells baseless and incoherent, and also a meaningless jumble of words. British judges often talk like that. It's as if they've never even seen a proper incantation. Take, for example, the case of Ryan versus LVR Capital in 2024. A wizard attempted a classic vanishing ritual on his financial obligations. The mundanes reacted like Mr. Ryan had handed them a dead frog, and the court coldly asserted that you cannot simply magic away debt. The judge, if you believe this, struck out all of Ryan's claims and granted a civil restraining order against him, preventing him from making any further applications. And then you've got the Matrix Freedom debacle. In any fair-minded magical society, a coordinated rite performed by hundreds of initiates would be recognised as a serious undertaking. But the mundane courts dismissed Ian Clifford Stamp's mystical wonders as nonsensical and a harmful mix of legal terms. A parody of the real thing, they said. Imagine being punished simply for seeing further than the villagers. And long before Dave Silver first waved his wand, there was Peter of England. Peter ran a magic emporium called We Re Bank that sold enchanted checkbooks. They could be used, he claimed, to pay off any debt, and it was possibly the most radical school of financial alchemy ever to exist in our country. Because Peter had figured out a way of making a bank account that could pay out more money than the customer put in without creating any debt. And he was teaching his disciples how to pay off mortgages, council tax, even utilities, or so the legends go. But that was in a time of magic and wonder. These days, the mundane world refuses to accept these kinds of magic checks as settlement. The FCA issued warnings that organisations should not accept Peter of England's We Re checks as payment. They warned that believers could end up with extra charges, county court judgments, even repossessions. And then the financial ombudsman performed the most brutal dispel magic of all, pointing out that We Re Bank wasn't even a real bank and, crucially, didn't have the capability to send any funds. But you know what? I think Dave is right, because the courts surely will find in his favour, because unlike every other wizard who tried this exact same trick, Dave has a moral code.
It's very important to bear in mind there's no loss, harm or injury. You can't use it in every situation. Make sure you've got clean hands approach, you stay in honour. Don't do anything that is morally wrong.
I think what Dave is trying to say here is that wizards are powerful, wise and mighty, and the only moral framework that counts is the one that aligns to his own private sense of right and wrong. And if Dave thinks that he's not done anything wrong, then it must be perfectly right proper and natural that a mighty magic user, a great sage equal to heaven such as him, should also be allowed to get stuff for free. But of course, only in special circumstances, when taking other people's valuable property without paying for it causes no loss, harm, or injury. And helpfully, Dave has given us an example of precisely that kind of deal where his flawless moral calculus applies.
A lot of people have been asking me, are you still driving your car that you paid for with a promissory note? And yes, I am, as you can see.
If you think that sounds like Dave just stole a car, it's because your wizarding perception hasn't fully developed yet. You're still anchored to the mortal realm where mundane objects are exchanged for base currency and promises are supposed to be, kept. Wipe those crude little mammalian thoughts from your mind, because today we learn to think like a true spellbinder. According to Dave Silver, he entered a hire purchase agreement with a lender in 2023. He paid the initial deposit in cash, and then when it came time to make the first monthly payment, instead of sullying himself with tawdry bank payments like a peasant, he settled the entire debt with one of his perfectly sensible, self-created promissory notes. Now, this scroll was imbued with the forces of the cosmos, the powers of star and moonlight, and the energies of the ethereal plane, and of course also his thumbprint. So, naturally, the lender, lacking the gift of true magical sight, refused this offering. But as have we learned, like the phoenix, Dave's magic gains its true power. It only emerges through its apparent destruction. That's the only way it can evolve into its final form. And so, whilst the lender, and maybe also the courts, might not yet comprehend what's happened, we, the enlightened few, those who perceive the eighth colour and who can hear the music of the cosmos, those of us who see the true nature beneath nature, well, we know the truth, which is that the vehicle has been metaphysically reassigned. The transformation is now complete, and in an entirely magical sense, this car now belongs to Dave.
Now, this is just a promissory note. This is just a promissory note. They are both broken promises. That's what I'm saying. This is a broken promise. It's just a note with a promise on it.
By broken promise, Dave isn't talking about his promise. No, he's talking about their promise, the state's promise. A long time ago, there was this old idea that money wasn't just a collective hallucination. It was paper backed by gold. But the history of the end of the gold standard is much more complicated than even most wizards would like to admit, so allow me a very brief and possibly flawed explanation. First, the boring but important point. Pound has never referred to the same unit of weight as a pound of sweets. A pound weight of gold did once refer to a fixed quantity of gold, a fixed weight, but that was significantly less than an imperial pound. And so pound sterling doesn't mean you could rock up and demand a pound of gold, or even a pound of sterling silver either, because sterling silver is an alloy that contains 98% elemental silver, and the fact that its name lives on in currency and alloy is likely because medieval pennies were once minted from that alloy. So, in the good old days, in the times when people believed in fairies, magic and wizards, and more specifically prior to the 1816 Coinage Act, we had a monetary system whose value was based on both metallic gold and metallic silver, because that was literally what the money was made from. And until 1914, you could still in theory exchange paper money for gold sovereigns, those little 22-carat gold coins weighing approximately 8 grams. But that wasn't something that normal people did every day, because not every town had a bank, most people didn't have bank accounts, and for a lot of working people, it might have well been a legend that somewhere, someone in the distant city can turn paper into gold. When the First World War began, the British government suspended the gold standard. It was reinstated in 1925, but in a weakened form. Officially, gold was still pegged at just under £4 per troy ounce, which is about 31 grams. But here's the bit that really weakened the magic. It was only the Bank of England that was obliged to make this particular exchange, no other bank, and then only in minimum quantities of about 400 troy ounces, which is about 12.5 kilos. So the cost was around £1,500 in 1925 money for one of those ingots, which is a spectacular amount of money, more than most people would earn in their entire lives. In 1931, Parliament finally abandoned the gold standard, and I think that's the betrayal that Dave seems to be complaining about. The mundanes didn't just change a policy, they took the golden shimmer out of the money, and in doing so, they made Dave's world a less magical place. And that, apparently, is exactly why he should be allowed to keep the car.
You can buy the entire vehicle with this big amount. It's a large amount, more than it would have cost to go and buy the car from a dealer to start with. But I wrote a promissory note for that amount and paid for it in cash because promissory notes are cash.
Now, before one of you smart Alex pipes up and says that the car still belongs to the lender, I know some of you really struggled with that metaphysical reassignment I discussed earlier. Well, technically, when Dave signed that finance agreement, it would have set out how the payments were supposed to be made. And if it said bank transfer or direct debit on a monthly schedule or whatever dull method that the mundane bank required, then their law doesn't let you unilaterally swap a payment for something else. So yes, according to the grey little realm, Dave is still driving somebody else's car. But Dave's mind is on higher things. You'll note that he named himself after that lustrous, pale element, silver, a name that he adopted on initiation to the wizarding world. And he's not the sort of wizard who hoards his beneficent magic. Dave wants to help you achieve the same transformation. And so I ask you, would a man as kind, as considerate, and as selfless as Dave be involved in something as wrong and tawdry as stealing a car?
The Bills of Exchange Act has not been repealed. Payment offered, payment refused, or payment returned is payment made. I have paid for it in cash.
I think we can all appreciate the elegance of Dave's argument. Because yes, in the mundane world, payment has to be rendered in the way the contract requires. And if you sign an agreement that says pay monthly by the agreed method, then that is what performance looks like. Muggles don't get to improvise. But Dave is invoking what I like to call the Airbud rule. Just as there's no rule that says dogs can't play basketball, crucially, there's no rule that says wizards can't transmogrify their payment schedules. I didn't see a single clause in Dave's contract that says no sorcery or transmutation. And in the absence of that explicit exclusion, surely magical payment remains on the table. Now, the boring old case law does tend to say that you can't unilaterally settle debt by offering some substitute that you personally claim to be real money. So you don't get to turn up with a gold bar, a lump of silver, or a pallet of prepper supplies and then declare that the contract has been satisfied. Unless the creditor agrees, which of course in this case seems very unlikely. But Dave's doctrine goes further because when the lender refuses the enchanted scroll, he claims that the refusal was the payment. The harder they object, the stronger the spell becomes. And if you're foolish enough to corner a wizard like that, he can always reach for the final incantation, the one that dissolves all accountability. He can look you dead in the eye and reveal the ultimate painful truth.
It's not legitimate money. Promissory notes are not legitimate money. If I pay from my bank account or I pay in cash, £50 notes, it is not legitimate money. Don't go thinking that's legitimate money and a handwritten promissory note isn't. They are both not legitimate money.
So none of it was ever real. We were all collectively hallucinating. Our minds are now collectively blown. We should count ourselves lucky that almost nobody watches this channel, Mind of Steel. I've deliberately made my content as obscure as possible, needlessly verbose and unrelatable. Why do you think I cultivate this pompous, arrogant persona? It's not because I want you to like me, it's because I know that this kind of information is just too dangerous. And the fewer people who watch this channel, the better. Imagine if this knowledge escaped into the wider culture. Imagine if a bigger channel, like, for example, Psyman Dan, ever decided to start covering promissory notes and sovereign citizens. I think we all know what would happen. Society would collapse overnight. It would be as if a magic wizard just Adava Kedivad the entire financial system. Because once the news gets out that all money is fake and that the only real money is gold that we so foolishly abandoned in 1930s, well then nothing matters and everything's permitted. All that is solid melts into air, all that is holy is profaned, and man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. And if Dave has committed a crime, then it's victimless, because if he has the power to destroy civilization, and the only price he demanded in return for this sweet, sweet mercy was an affordable 2023 model MG4 long-range electric vehicle, isn't that a small price to pay for our continued survival? Anyway, he is as humble as he is generous, as he is powerful and merciful. And I'm sure that he has the purest intentions for humanity, which is why I think he's about to teach us all his magic.
And that's how I paid for this car. You can too. You can do self-liquidating loans as long as nobody loses anything. As long as there's no loss, harm or injury.
Wizards are mighty. Wizards are inscrutable, and when wizards go to war with each other, their reasons are rarely comprehensible to those of us trapped in the material realm. Which is why I find the next bit so fascinating, because Richard Vobes, that patron saint of itinerant sorcerers, a man who has spent years ushering every healer, shaman and cosmic tinkerer into his boudoir, well, he's done something that he almost never does. He's turned his back on a guest. And that's genuinely remarkable because Richard's whole thing is that he doesn't object to anyone. He nods, he smiles, he marvels, and he yes-ands the conversation. And then he wafts on to the next magical idea. So, when Richard Vobes suddenly develops a boundary, you have to wonder, is Dave dabbling in the dark arts?
The other day we had a gentleman on, Dave Silver, who produced a video with me about promissory notes. Because I think people have got to do their own due diligence and not immediately jump on what any of the guests on this show or any other show say, I was slightly concerned that the promissory note that he put together in and of itself may lead people into some troubles.
Richard's YouTube channel has hosted some of the most luminous minds of our age. He welcomed mighty healers like Tom Palladino, who claimed that his Tesla Starlight apparatus could cure disease at a distance, even HIV/AIDS. Richard has also hosted Hope and Tivon, a pair of orgonite entrepreneurs from Morocco, who claimed that their inventions could protect users from deadly 5G radiation. The fact that the amulets were based on the implausible theories of Wilhelm Reich and were apparently made from industrial waste products and then encased in resin, well, that wasn't a problem for Richard either. And then, of course, there was Colin Wyatt, who claims that the weather itself can be modified if only you boil enough vinegar in your back garden. Apparently, his bubbling cauldron can even dispel what he charmingly refers to as chemtrails. Richard featured Colin on his show without even a single hint of skepticism. And of course, Richard also featured Gary Waterman, the former police officer turned awakened wonder. And he's a man who believes that he has discovered the world's biggest conspiracy theory just by looking in the Companies House database. Of course, these days Gary is more famous for his dramatic vandalism of 5G infrastructure. So yes, Richard applies an excessively inclusive policy when picking his guests, which is why I'm genuinely astonished that Dave Silver is the one who finally made Richard pause for concern.
It also, he questions, why is it all in capitals? Well, that's a very interesting thing, because we know that in the Chicago Manual of Styles, that correct grammar written out is not written in capitals. If it's written in capitals, that is basically an acronym or hieroglyphics.
So, as we've learned, Richard's reasons for rejecting Dave are as serious and credible as we might have expected. You might be surprised to learn that Dave is only a part-time wizard, even though he has the power to create infinite money. For some reason, he has to work 5 days a week as a pest controller. You can hire Dave to eradicate a rat's nest or purge an infestation. If you're pestered by pests or plagued by a plague, why not call on Dave Silver's rat-catching services? And when he presents you with his invoice, I'm sure the most spiritually correct response would be to reward him in the currency of his preference. A promissory note, one you perhaps printed yourself, also with a £5 note laminated into it. As far as I'm aware, Dave has never said that he doesn't accept cash, and so if we take him at his word, and that cash and promissory notes are equivalent, then what harm can it do? That's of course assuming that you can find him, because right now he might be on the run from the law. Perhaps he'll go off-grid and live off the decades of tinned food that he has accumulated in his shed, assuming of course that the muggles don't try to repossess his house as well. And if that happens, well, there's always the next heroic phase, because he can become an itinerant wizard, just like Gary Waterman. Perhaps he'll acquire a camper van with another one of his promissory notes and then tour the Highlands, dispensing financial enlightenment from the glens and the lochs. It would be a tragedy, of course. We would have lost one of the greatest magical alchemists of our era. So, yes, let us all hope that doesn't happen. Dave Silver. What a man. If you're intrigued as I am about Dave Silver and his promissory note scam, well, hop on over to the Mind of Steel chat. That's a Telegram group that I run where people who enjoy the show can argue, vent and share clips and generally compare notes on whichever magician has decided to reinvent reality this week. And you might even be able to discuss it with Dave Silver himself, because Dave has a habit of showing up in my chat forum from time to time. He is exactly as boring and tiresome as you'd expect, so come along before we have to mute him again. Dave, by the way, if you think I've misrepresented you, you are free to represent your right to respond. We will unmute you, that's if I remember, and give you a chance to say your bit. Just please try to stay on topic. And if anyone else thinks I'm wrong, I'm sure I got some historical or financial details incorrect, please tell me in the comments in this chat, because unlike the conspiracy theorists, I don't treat correction as an attack. And if you genuinely know more about it than I do, please, I want to hear the correction. So until then, I will see you in the next episode of Mind of Steel, which will be in the next few weeks, whenever I can be bothered to make it. I'm enjoying this slightly more laid-back production schedule. And honestly, I think it suits the subject matter because the magicians aren't going anywhere yet.